to A Day in the Life. For the past 96 editions of this program, we have been live in the Midland Cultural Center in front of a live audience. But due to the pandemic restrictions, we're not able to produce the program that way. So we're trying something new. This is the virtual edition of A Day in the Life. We are delighted to be with you and happy to be able to tell you that our season sponsor continues to support us. Thank you to Kathy Bales and to Michelle Bishaw of RBC Dominion Securities. We are grateful for their continuing support of this program. And for this particular show, our sponsors are HGR Graham Partners Lawyers, and we extend our thanks to them. I want to just quickly tell you about an upcoming program. Our next guest on this virtual in-your-home edition of A Day in the Life will be the former Chief Justice of Canada, Beverley McLachlin. She is the first woman to serve as the Chief Justice in Canada and the longest serving Chief Justice in the history of the country. So we look forward to our conversation with Beverley McLachlin. Well, now it is my special pleasure to introduce to you today's guest, one of the most acclaimed performers in Canada, a triple sensation, actor, singer, dancer. I'm delighted to welcome Cynthia Dale. Hi,
hello.
Cynthia.
Hi.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to do this program. Where are you today, Cynthia?
Pardon me?
Where are you?
I am in Stratford, in beautiful Stratford. That's where we live. And I am grateful that I've been able to be holed up here with most of my family for this crazy, crazy time that we're living in.
Well, we're delighted to share this program with you, and delighted to have you as the first guest as we do this program live in the homes of our audience. The idea behind this program, Cynthia, is that we look at the events, the circumstances, and the people who may have inspired you in your life. And I want to begin by talking about your early days. You grew up in Toronto, and I'm fascinated with when your professional career began.
Yes, I was 5 years old. My mother took my sisters and I to an audition at the Royal Alexandra Theatre. The first show I ever did was Finian's Rainbow. Carmel Quinn, I don't know if you know that name, and Bert Wheeler were the stars of the show, and Molly Johnson and I don't know if you or any of your audience knows Molly Johnson, the fantastic singer in Canada. We were the two little kids in the show.
Now, that's a very young age to get started. How did you feel that you had been stampeded into that by your mother, or was that something you wanted to do?
Yeah, no, I don't think I was stampeded into it. I think I was given the opportunity. It was a dance teacher that we had at the time, a woman named Gladys Forrester, who was a mentor to me for most of my life growing up, who heard about the auditions, and I guess she told many of the mothers at the studio at the time. And so we were just given the opportunity. I was a little kid with a big voice, and I went and sang for my audition, and I got the gig.
And you went on from there to do a number of programs as a young person at the CBC. Could you tell us some of the places from which we might remember you?
Yeah, as a kid, I grew up in the halls of the CBC at 90 Sumac Street in Toronto, and I was a regular on the Tommy Hunter Show and a regular on the Wayne and Schuster specials. There was, back in the 60s and 70s, especially in the 70s, the CBC had a very vibrant variety department. And so there were musicals that were done on some of the great composers, and I was in a lot of those in series called To See Ourselves, which were drama series that were done at the time. And also when I was younger, I did an original musical written by Norman Campbell and Don Herron, who wrote Anne of Green Gables, that was on the life of Emily Carr.
And how old were you when you did that?
I was 11 years old, and they wrote it, Emily Carr as a child, Emily Carr middle, and Emily Carr older. And I played Emily Carr as a child.
Okay. Now, you also did a lot of commercials at that time.
Yeah, I did about 75 commercials between the ages of 5 and 15. Yeah.
Wow. Where'd you go to school? Where'd you do your primary education?
St. Clement's Catholic School in Etobicoke.
And with the role that you had outside school, did that impact your relationship with the kids in your school?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Kids make fun of what is different. Not just kids, but particularly kids, I guess. And I was different. I was odd in the sense that I wasn't at school very much because I was away working. And so I was made fun of a lot, and by the kids and by the teachers. I was kicked out of 2 classes because the teachers acted like, well, you're not here in my class enough, so I don't want to teach you anymore. I had a mother that would go screaming into the principal's office on a regular basis, which didn't make it easy either, in fact, because yes, kids can make fun of you, but also when you're a kid yourself, you just want to be normal, right? You just want to be like everybody else. In that world, you just want to be special. At work, I was treated with responsibility, and at school, I was, disrespected. It was a different system than the schooling system, I believe.
Cynthia, would the other students not be impressed that they're seeing one of their classmates on television?
No. There wasn't any of that then at all. No, they could go home from after school and see me on TV, see me in commercials, and that was weird. And so I was just made fun of a lot. I mean, thank God social media didn't exist then, so I didn't have to deal with that kind of a pressure of being bullied. But it was not an enjoyable experience for me being at grade school at all.
You were probably the only kid in grade school paying taxes.
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly, yes.
Belonging to a union.
And belonging to a union, yeah.
Were you in a union as a young actor?
Did I have to join the union? Yes, yeah. I've been an actor member since I was 5 years old, yeah.
That interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you do your secondary school?
St. Joseph's Michael Power High School in Etobicoke. I spent every night of my life in grade school and in high school, every day after school at the dance studio.
Wow.
That's just what we did. And so, that was great until, you're in sort of that time in high school when all your friends are going to a party on Friday nights and you're going off to dance school. And
what types of dance did you major in?
Oh, well, you had to do ballet, tap, and jazz. I mean, that was just what you did. And I worked still, as a performer and in the business. When you're a kid, it's a hobby in a way, right? It's not that it's a way of life, and you don't know that that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. There comes a point in your teenage years where you have to make a commitment. And that's the time when you're, like I said, going to the Banff School of Fine Arts in the summer instead of going to camp with everyone else. And that's just what I did. And so at some point in my high school years, I guess I realized that this is really what I wanted to do. And even though I'd been given the opportunity, and I guess I always thought I would do this, I think I was born. I came in knowing I wanted to do this in a way. I was lucky that I had teachers and a mother especially that supported me. My father supported us, but in a sort of silent, begrudging way. My mom was a bit more of a Mama Rose, I would say.
You mentioned the Banff School of Fine Arts. What did you do there?
I did the musical theater program. But because I was such a dancer at the time, they let me out to go and do the ballet classes in the ballet program sometimes, which was fantastic to do. When I was 17 years old and when I was 18 years old, both summers I spent at the Banff School of Fine Arts.
Now, I mentioned off the top the triple threat that you are with your multiple skills, but I understand when you were at the Banff School that they really thought you only had one talent. Is that true?
Well, the head of the school at the time, when I went back for my second year, he made a comment to me at the very beginning of the summer. You have to go and you had to perform, you had to sing and do your monologues and do your stuff for the whole faculty, the musical theater faculty, so that they would have a sense of what you were going to be like for the 6 or 8 weeks that you were there. And I had gone home after my first summer, and I'd spent the whole year studying at the Royal Conservatory, music and singing, and I'd worked with acting coaches, and I'd really come back feeling like I'd grown as a performer, even though I was so young. And he told me that I didn't need to worry because I'd never be anything but a dancer.
Really?
And, yeah. And other than it being a gut punch and it being an incredibly mean thing to say to a young performer, I guess somewhere inside me, it spurred me on enough to maybe have me prove that I could be more. Although at the same time, what it does is, I mean, to this day, at 60 years old, I still feel like I'm an imposter half the time, because I guess somewhere inside me, it was fed in that maybe you're not good enough to sing and act like you think you should be.
Well, I have difficulty believing that, because your career has spanned so many different elements, and we want to explore some of those. You've done television, you've done movies, you've made recordings, you've been on the Stratford Stage, you've been on other commercial stages. Do you view yourself as having had numerous careers?
No, it's all one career. It's all one career. It's just what you do. It's like if you're a dancer, and especially if you're in musical theater, then you act, sing, and dance. You don't just do one thing. No, it's all one career. I'm a performer. I'm an actor. Yeah, and a singer, and I was a dancer.
I was interested, Cynthia, when you and I had chatted previously, you mentioned that there was one thing that you felt you should have done to prepare for your career. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I said I wish I'd got a business degree.
Tell us why you think that's important.
Well, I think every young performer should do that. I think every theater school should be teaching a business class at the same time, because I'm a business. I'm a self-employed performer. I'm an actor. I'm a self-employed person. And I think that it would have done me good to know a little bit more about that stuff. And that has nothing to do with having something to fall back on. That's different. Lots of actors, especially now, they start their own theater company, or you have to learn how to pay a publicist and an agent and your taxes and maybe a recording engineer, and figure out how to sell a CD and how to be a producer of concerts. And you have to figure out all that stuff, how to hire a stage manager and a sound man and all that stuff. And so it's just not enough that you can do a triple time step. In fact, you need to do a lot else too.
Let's talk about some of the elements of your career. And I want to begin with Stratford. And I want to ask you, how do you feel about Stratford?
It was the best place. It is the best place in the world to work. It's the best theater in the world to work for me. Well, for many people. Well, the first time I was ever at the Stratford Festival, I was 21 years old. I did the Mikado and Gondoliers here with the late great Brian McDonald. And the third day I was in rehearsals here. Here's a little story. I'll tell it as briefly as possible. We were doing the Gondoliers, and it was a raked stage, which means it's on an angle so the audience can see it better. And the Gondoliers were blindfolded in the opening scene of meeting all the girls and all the women. And I was blocked to run down stage at one point, and I ran down stage and got tripped by a gondolier who didn't realize where I was because he was blindfolded. And I went hurtling forward and fell into the orchestra pit that was empty at the time, thank goodness, 16 feet down onto a concrete floor, and cracked my heel in half.
Oh.
And I screamed lots of profanities, and they had to lift me out on a stretcher, and they took me to the hospital, and they took an x-ray of my foot, and they showed me my heel cracked right in half. And I can remember sitting in the hospital crying, "Don't tell Stratford, please don't tell Stratford," because I knew I'd be fired. I'd be let go, because it was only third day of rehearsal, and so you replace that girl fast. And so I learned the show. They kept me in the company. I learned the show sitting in the audience with my foot up, watching someone do my part. And I didn't dance. I didn't walk properly, and certainly didn't dance on my foot for 3 weeks. And for 10 years afterwards, I could tell when it was going to rain before anybody else. And because of the ache in my heel. So that was my first experience at the Stratford Festival. Then when I came back many, many years later, when Richard Manette, the late, great, beautiful angel that he was, Richard Manette, asked me to come back, I fell in love with the place, and I was really lucky that they fell in love with me too. And it became home for 12 years. And I learned more about myself and more about performing and working with actors and than I ever could have learned anywhere else.
Cynthia, if we had the time, I would love to do a complete list of all of your credits at Stratford, because it really reads like a who's who and what's what of musical theater. You've done it all. You've done every big
I got to play the canon. I really got to play the canon, the great canon. I did, yes.
Could you just tell us, because we can't go through, I mean, there's so many of them. What were your two favorite roles at Stratford?
Oh, I don't know if I had two favorites. I know that probably the dream of my life, from a child sitting on my bed at home as a child, the dream role for me had been My Fair Lady.
Yeah,
and so to get to play that part,
yes,
for the 50th season, with Richard directing, with Colm Feore and Geraint Wyn Davies, and with Richard for a night even, it was the dream for sure. It was the dream. It was the magical.
I would have guessed that as a child actress, you would have looked to either that role or The Sound of Music, which you also did. You were.
You know, The Sound of Music was not a role I had been desperate to play.
Really?
It was not a role. And I had just had my baby, and I had no desire to go back to work right away. And they'd offered it to me twice. And I was like, I don't know if I want to come back, because I was happy at home being a mom. And I am so grateful I did that role, because to play a woman who follows her bliss for 10 months was phenomenal. And to learn that gift and to have that seep into my being, I adored playing that role. And I'm really, really grateful that my angels around me and other people in my life were much smarter than I was, and led me to play that part.
You mentioned the role that Richard Manette has played in your career. Are there other people like that, perhaps in Stratford or elsewhere, who have been guiding lights for you in your professional career?
Here at Stratford, another man named Michael Lichtefeld, an American man who was a choreographer who first came up my first season and choreographed Camelot. And then he came back and did Man of La Mancha with me. And then he came back years later and did Guys and Dolls. And he did, then he directed me in South Pacific and My One and Only. And he was more than a friend and more than a guide. He was a huge influence on my work ethic, coming from the dancer work ethic, which has a different discipline, I think. And him being that as well, we clicked incredibly.
Before we leave Stratford, I want to just mention a couple of names to you. One of them is a native of Midland, from where we're presenting this program, Peter Donaldson. You knew Peter well?
I did. He was one of my husband's best friends. And his wife and I Sheila McCarthy and I were incredibly close friends for 40 years, of course, since we worked together when I was 18 years old. Yeah, I loved Pete a lot. We did Taming of the Shrew together.
Did you? Yeah. He was a great leading man. I saw him a couple of times, and he was just spectacular.
Spectacular. He was spectacular.
Yeah, yeah. The other name I'll just mention quickly, and this is a bit of a plug for our program, but Antoni Simolino, the artistic director, is going to be our guest this fall.
Anthony Cimolino, yes. Yes. Yeah. Anthony Cimolino, he's incredible with what he's done with the festival and his vision. Yeah. Beautiful.
And you worked with him on, was it?
We started, the first time we ever worked together was in Camelot. He was Richard's assistant director on Camelot. And we never did another show together, but because we did so many events together here at the theater, or traveling to Chicago together, or at West together, or so many concerts or different events that we had to do together for all the years I was here. And he was someone I went to often to ask advice for about different things that came up, and whether did you think this is a good idea? Should I do this? What do you think about this? Yeah, he is a fantastic person with the theater, for sure.
Let's talk about some of your other stage performances. You did theater in a barn once.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Why would you do that?
Because it was a part I'd wanted to do my whole life as well. I wanted to do Sweet Charity all my life. And anyone in the musical theater who could play that part would, give their right eye for it. I mean, you just would. Like, so Michael Lichtenfeld was directing it at Drayton, and I went and did it. I could smell the cows next door from my dressing room, and it didn't matter. I loved doing it. I loved working with that company, and I was lucky enough that it was a dream come true. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time for anybody, let alone performers. I have been incredibly blessed and lucky that I have had dreams come true, and that was a dream come true.
You also did theater in New York.
I did do a show in New York. Yes, I did. I did Tamara off Broadway, which was a Canadian play that John Krizank and Richard Rose wrote about Tamara de Lempicka. And Richard Rose directed it. Yeah, that was a heady experience. Yeah.
What's that like? Is the New York theater scene that much different from anything else?
This was the 80s, 1880s. I mean, it was so long ago. And New York was very different then. It was very, very different. You didn't, walk down the street looking people in the eye. I mean, you had to have a chip on your shoulder in a whole different way, walking out to get groceries. I moved there alone to a 4-floor walk up, and did this play. And I think back about how brave I was. But it was pretty incredible.
For one of your other stage productions, you won the Dora Moore Award. Can you tell us about that, the play, and how you felt about winning that award?
That was directed by the late, great Larry Lillo. And it starred Martha Henry and Morris Panich. And how lucky can a girl get to work with them? And when I won my award, I thanked my G-string because, if you know that show, the Red Hot Mamas, we wore G-strings in the club, as you do in Pal Joey. And that was a huge, it's not that I'm so much into awards other than, and it probably should have been Martha's and not mine that year, but it was a validation of maybe being more than just a dancer, as some people had said. And
what theater was it at?
At the Tarragon Theatre in Toronto, and then it transferred to the Grand Theatre in London. Maurice Godin did the lead at that point. Again, when I look back on those experiences, I am so grateful I was so brave. They were pretty heady.
I hear the dressing room situation for that play was a little unusual.
Yeah. Well, in Toronto, all the girls were in the same dressing room, which meant that the grande dame Martha Henry, who is has become since then one of my dearest friends, was in the dressing room with us. And that was a pretty strange experience, to be in a dressing room, all of us together, for her and for us. As a leading lady at the Stratford Festival, as she had been all her life, she had probably never shared a dressing room with other women, and certainly not a bunch of chorus girls, which is what we were. And so sometimes you're lucky enough to do a project where the world off stage is as rich as the world on stage. And it doesn't diminish the incredible world on stage, but there's something that happens in the alchemy in a dressing room with a bunch of women together that is like nothing else. That happened to me when I did Fun Home in Toronto a few years ago. All of us, all the girls were in the dressing room together. And like I said, there is something that just the caulking of your life becomes different. It just fills up. Because you have those women around you before you even walk on stage. It's pretty great.
And you were young when you did that. You were just mid-20s, were you not, when you did Pal Joey?
Yeah, 24, 25, yes. Yes.
Was that a significant turning point, that award and that production?
Yes, it was the first time I'd done a project like that with that major a theater in the city. I think right before that, I'd done Dames at Sea in Toronto, again directed by Brian McDonald. But Pal Joey had a different weight to it because of the people in it, Martha and Morris and Larry, and so it was a different. It was a different stream in a way, you know. It was hitting a different gear of life for me. It was pretty amazing.
Just before we leave the stage, I want to touch briefly on some concert experiences that you had. You worked with the Kitchener-Waterloo Orchestra.
Yes, I did a symphony gig there a few years ago, and I sang with the National Arts Centre Symphony. And I'll tell you, the only way I can describe the experience of standing in front of a symphony is like having God behind you. Having that many people and that wave of sound, riding that wave of sound, was mind-blowing. I mean, I'm used to having people on stage with me. That was completely different.
And the sound would normally be coming in front of you from the orchestra pit.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. And I mean, and I've even done shows with some of the orchestra on stage with me, or in a loft above, or anything like that. It's just, it was something about that size, and it was fantastic.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's switch to movies. You've done a number of movie roles. How did you get into movies? Your
agent sends you up on an audition. You know, it's no different than sending you on an audition for a theater gig. It really isn't. If you're an actor, if you have an agent, they're sending you on auditions for everything and anything. And it's no different auditioning for a series, auditioning for a movie, or auditioning for a play. It's just, you're just going for auditions. And if you're lucky enough, you know, they click.
Any special memories from the movies you made?
Yeah, doing Boy in Blue with Nick Cage was pretty amazing, and you know, it was a tiny little part, but doing Moonstruck with Norman Jewison, I got the call to do the audition. It was in the middle of winter, and the call came through the agent that Cher was sick and they couldn't film the schedule that they were supposed to do, so they had to push up other scenes. And so they were auditioning for this scene with John Mahoney, and you had to come in the morning on audition, and if you got the part, you had to stay and film it for the day and the next day. And wow. So you had to bring your own wardrobe options, because there was no time to do a wardrobe call and all of that. They were having to juggle around the schedule because she had got sick, got a cold or flu or something. And I'd worked with Nick a few years before on Boy in Blue, although he wasn't around when I shot Moonstruck at all. It was just John and Olympia Dukakis and myself. And so I went in the morning, and I remember driving in a snowstorm way out to the East End to the studio that they were filming in. And there were maybe 6 or 7 girls going in to do the scene, doing the audition. And after I did my audition, Norman said, "Don't go anywhere." And so I had to go out and sit there in the room. And all the other girls were looking at me like, "What are you still doing sitting here?" And I sort of was like, I couldn't say, "Well, I think I got the part." Like I just sort of had to wait. Yeah, that was, I was really lucky, as heady as that experience was working with all of them. I knew a lot of the crew guys when I got on set. I'd done some films with the same crew. So it felt a little safe. I also, you know, I'm the kind of performer that sits and eats lunch with the crew. Some people say, you know, you shouldn't do that. You should only hang around with the actors and all that stuff. I didn't never do that. I always sat and ate with the crew. And I remember sitting, eating the crew with the camera guys. And it was just listening to stories about, you know, what they were talking about and the movies they'd worked on and Norman. And it was all, it was just like another world. It was just like another world because it was Hollywood, right? You know.
Now, Cynthia, there's probably somebody watching this program right now saying, "When are we going to talk about Street Legal?" So I think it's time, and certainly a lot of your fans will know you from that wonderful CBC production. Tell us about the role you played first.
Well, it was Olivia Novak, and I was actually in New York City doing Tamara when I auditioned for the part. And I had been, I'd done the audition. The CBC had come to New York to audition Canadians in New York City for the part. And I'd done the audition and then went and did my show that night, and then went, as we often did, after the show, we went and played poker at a friend's house. And I stayed out way too late, till 4 a.m, because the next day was a day off for us. And I got home to a message on my machine from my agent saying, "I don't know what you did, but they're flying you to Toronto to audition for this part tomorrow morning." And like I said, it was 4 a.m. I didn't really get any sleep, and I had to get up, and I didn't even own a little business suit to go and audition in. So before I left New York in the morning, I went out and bought a little business suit and got on a plane and flew to Toronto and did the audition. And like the rest is history. Like I did 7 years on that. And for 7 years, I had the best job in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us about the experience of suddenly being recognized by everybody in Canada because you're on such a popular television show.
Well, there was something that happened in the zeitgeist of Canadian TV at that point. There were so many shows. There was Street Legal and ENG, and there had been Night Heat, and there was Road to Avonlea, and all those shows and the world of Canadian television at that moment were changing the landscape for the Canadian audience. Up until that point, the Canadian audience could name every A, B, C level American actor on every single show they watched. And all of a sudden, they started to learn the names of Canadian actors. All of a sudden, we weren't just no names. They recognized us. And so that was a big learning curve for Canada as a whole, sort of stepping into its cultural space in television. We had definitely done that in music and in books, but in television we really stepped into it then. And so to be a part of that and to ride that wave of what that to see that it started off, you know, at the beginning of it, nobody knew us, and by the end, 7 years later, it had really made its mark. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience. And you know, it didn't last. We only did one season, but I was incredibly grateful 2 years ago, to be able to do a revamp of that show, and to visit it again. I'm incredibly proud of what we did with the revamp. I always will be. I'll always believe that there are many, many political powers at play that made that show not happen and get picked up for a second season. But it wasn't because it wasn't good. It was really, really freaking good. It was.
Nostalgia has a big role in our society, and I think even more so during this virus. Did a lot of people relate to the program because they'd seen it before? Was it a kind of a this is part of my past?
I think so. I think that's why it got a lot of attention. You're talking about the revamp. I think that's why it had a lot of attention. I think the TV landscape is very different, and so we were aware of that, and the creators who worked on it were aware of that. But I think that there was a special spot in people's hearts. I mean, that's why lots of shows came back. Some worked, some didn't. Some got a second season, some didn't. I have no regrets. Oh, I have regrets about how things were handled. I have no regrets about doing it.
It's pretty amazing to me that you reprised a role that you had done how many years earlier?
I don't know, 60 or 70. I don't know. It felt that long ago, believe me.
There's a big gap there.
Yeah, a very big gap.
Let's talk about some of your other television experiences, because you've done lots of other shows. Well, you did 13 episodes of something called Taking the Falls.
I did. That wasn't a huge success at all.
Okay.
No, that wasn't a success.
What programs, other programs, do you remember from your television experience?
Oh,
you were a judge on Triple Sensations.
Oh, that was fantastic because we got to have, it was Marvin Hamlish and Adrian Noble and Sergio Trujillo and Garth Drabinsky. And talk about, like, all I wanted to do was sit at the knee of Marvin and listen to his stories. That's all I wanted to do. Really, because just that. I mean, I think it was a great experience for a lot of young performers who came in and auditioned for the team and went through the whole process of that show. But what I got to experience by being the only girl on that panel with those guys, I mean, and I got to travel across the country with them and have wine and stories and talks and listen to them. Really, I was the one who was the winner on that experience.
That's fun. You did something called Christmas Dreams.
I did. It was a Christmas movie that I co-produced with Perry Zimmel and some other people, and Sue Murdoch, and it was a musical, and Susan Coyne wrote a beautiful script, and it was a steep learning curve. That was my first sort of producing gig in TV at all, co-producing gig in TV. And we shot it here in Stratford, which was really great to do.
It was a CBC production.
It was a CBC Christmas movie, yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of your musical albums. I hadn't been aware of this additional element of your career, but you're also a recording star. You've made a number of CDs. Tell us how that came about.
I made 3 CDs. And my dear friend, David Hogan, who was a bright, shining light in our world, was in Sound of Music with me. And he came into my dressing room one day, spent lots of time in my dressing room, and we were talking, and he said, let's do a CD. And I was like, who's going to listen to a CD that I sing, that I do? And he said, no, we'll do this. We'll co-produce it, and we'll pick some songs. And I had always loved voice and piano CDs. I loved the pure simplicity of that. And Laura Burton, who was our piano player at the Stratford Festival, great musical director and incredible woman, and a friend, and I asked her if she would play with me. And David and I literally shook on it, and that was our contract. We didn't do a lawyer and do all that stuff. And we were in each other's lives and in each other's hearts. And so we knew that we trusted each other. And we went to a studio in Toronto and I picked, I don't know, 10 or 12 songs that I'd always loved. Some from shows I'd done, some from shows I wish I could do. And then we sold that, I guess, the next year when I did My Fair Lady. After the show, I would do signings and we'd sell the CDs. And we were really, really lucky. We sold a lot of CDs and did many, many printings. And
why did you want to do that, Cynthia? What inspired you, aside obviously from David coming into the dressing room? But...
No, seriously, that was the inspiration. It's like, thank God there's been people in my life who've been smarter than me, who've said, either whispered in my ear or hit me upside the head and said, you need to do this, or you should do this. Really, I bow down to people who are smarter than me. I've always been a keener, and I've always stepped into yes, and I'm always prepared to go for it. But other people have been way smarter in saying, what do you think about this idea? And so that was the inspiration. Someone planting the seed. That was enough of an inspiration.
What kind of music did you record? What kind?
It was mainly musical theater, and it wasn't pop kind of stuff. I'm not a pop singer. I know my lane, and I know my audience. It was the audience who were coming to see me in the show. And then when I went and did concerts for about 4 or 5 years after that, it was singing the songs from the CDs. And I guess a lot of the music as well was music that I would never get to sing, or wasn't from a show per se, but, right. Beautiful music, or even Stephen Sondheim music that I would never get to sing otherwise. At that point, I hadn't done any Stephen Sondheim musicals. So to go back to Stratford and to list the other special moment, other than My Fair Lady, the other special one for me was the musical Passion. The Stephen Sondheim show Passion that I got to do. We did it in concert, directed by Gary Griffin, who'd done I'm blanking with me now, 42nd Street. And that was a highlight for me. That was an incredible highlight for me. It was in the studio theater. It wasn't a full-scale production. We only did 6 or 8 of them, I think. And that for sure, out of all my time at the Stratford Festival, was another highlight.
I want to come back to the recording again, because that's an industry that has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
If you were doing that, you could actually sell CDs.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's a very different environment.
Yeah. No, you don't. From the time when I first did my first CD and you could sell them for $20, and by the third CD that you were selling them for $5. There was no money to be made. When Justin Bieber and Beyonce and Barbra Streisand are selling their CDs for $5 at Walmart or something, like, who am I? Like, you can't make any money. So my life didn't lend itself to being on tour, which is how a lot of performers can make money selling CDs. So I stopped doing them, in the sense that I also, I didn't have anything I wanted to say. I didn't have any songs I specifically wanted to sing. And so thank goodness that happened at the same time that the world changed, as far as and I didn't do them to make money. It's not but you obviously wanted it to be able to pay for itself.
Sure.
And you couldn't even do that at the end.
Cynthia, I want to talk to you about some of your personal qualities, because I'm very impressed with your discipline. Where did that come from? Is that the dancer's discipline?
I think so. I think it's probably always, I think it's something you're born with. I think it's always been in me, but I do think that came from the dance discipline.
Because you've worked a lot. I mean, when I go through your credits, it's astounding the number of shows you've done on stage, movies, theater. You have to have discipline to be able to stay with the arduous responsibility that being a performer is.
Mm-hmm. I'm also really old. I've been around a long time.
Let me assure you, you do not look old at all.
But, I also, it's like, I think that I read a great quote the other day. Oh, I was reading about Ian Holm, who just died. And someone was talking about how he'd said, I think it was him who they were quoting, that in a rehearsal room, the two people who work the hardest are the young journeyman and the lead. The young journeyman, because they realized the opportunity they got in front of them and they're sitting there watching everybody and learning everything. And the lead, because they know what a responsibility it is. And I think that for all those years that I did, especially Stratford, street legal as well, I'm a workhorse. I know that. And I don't mind that. But if it means I sing a big role, and so for 10 months of the year, I can't drink alcohol because of my vocal cords, then I don't do that. Then I just can't do that. Or I can't go to the bar at night, then I just don't do that. Or if it means, you know, I have to stay home and learn lines, then that's just the way it is. I actually sort of thrive on that kind of responsibility. That doesn't bother me. I think if someone's cast you and put you in that role and putting all that money behind you and on your back, it would behoove you to be able to come up with the goods.
Deliver. Mm-hmm. The other quality that we've seen already here in our brief conversation is your sense of humor. You have great timing.
Oh, okay, good. Again, I don't think that's something that can be taught. Like talent, I don't think talent can be taught. I think it can be honed. I think it can be polished. I think it can be refined. Same with timing. I think I think the timing for me also comes that came from dancing or understanding in a tap beat or where the button happens.
There's a rhythm to humor.
There's a rhythm to it. And I've had some great teachers. You know, Richard Manette was a fantastic teacher on teaching timing. He was, you know, how long do you take a breath for? How long do you don't? Don't breathe out. Don't let them hear like he was just, it was, you know, precise. It's like doing a David Mamet play. You play those periods and the pauses and all that. Don't add anything. Like, you know, it's that.
Cynthia, our program is called A Day in the Life, and I'm wondering if you could share with us what a typical day would look like when you were doing a stage production, for example.
Well, so probably the first thing I do when my eyes open to consciousness is you hum to hear what the first thing is you have. Okay. Literally. How swollen the cords are from the show the night before, you know, what kind of pollen is in the air, whatever, how that's the first thing you do, see what you have. And other than coffee immediately, yeah, your whole day revolves around 8 o'clock at night. Okay. So you pace yourself completely for that moment. What you eat, how well you're going to fit in your costumes, how well you're going to feel comfortable, how much you eat for the energy to get through a show, how much you talk, how much you don't talk, which is more really what it is, how much you don't talk. When you do your vocal warm-up, when you do your body warm-up, how much you tax yourself, how much you don't tax yourself. It's all about it all funnels towards 8 o'clock. Or if you're a big number is at 10 o'clock and not at 8 o'clock, you are keeping that energy and even your vocal, how much you talk in the dressing room, how much you talk at intermission, what you do, what do you have to do at intermission to keep your voice loose and all that stuff. What do you drink backstage? Like all of that. How much do you hork? Like, I know that sounds awful, but that's the life of a singer. Yeah. And so, you know, it's all about that focus.
I want to ask you a few questions about your career, but also about the industry. Why did you stay in Canada? Many Canadian stars find fame and fortune in LA or New York. You chose to stay in Canada. Why?
Well, I mean, I did what every other Canadian performer has done. I went and did the auditions in Los Angeles. You know, I went and did it. I did the pilot season. And if I'd got a pilot there and a TV series, who knows what would have happened. And I was in New York City doing Tamara. You know, I went where the work was. And that's when Street Legal presented itself. And then I met Pete. And so, you know, our lives were pretty focused here. I don't know. I also realized doing Street Legal and especially doing Stratford, the grass ain't so much greener.
Okay, good for you.
Really, you know, I mean, I think the work that happens at the Stratford Festival rivals the work that can happen at any other theater anywhere in the world. Most definitely on Broadway, many, many times. I'm not talking about the exceptions to the exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about the norm. And certainly, if I was lucky enough to be doing the work that I was doing for 7 years on a show in Canada with Street Legal, it was as good as and held up with a lot of other American shows.
Absolutely.
Especially at that time. You know, the one we were compared to at the time was LA Law. Well, our show was brazenly Canadian. We handled Canadian issues, and that was fantastic. I don't know about everybody, but I grew into my Canadian identity. Mm-hmm. I grew into my love of Canada. And so the more that grew, the more my roots went down in the soil here, the more I couldn't have gone and uprooted and desperately wanted to work elsewhere.
I want to ask you briefly to comment on the importance of 2 or 3 things. What's the importance of the Stratford Festival to this country?
I think that, well, no, there are many things, but I'll just use it as an example of what I believe is one of the most important times of the Stratford Festival. The most important time for me at the Stratford Festival was always the fall, because that's when the school kids came. And that audience was the audience of tomorrow for the Stratford Festival. It was the audience that was going to go home to their family and say, oh my God, guess what I just saw today? Or I'd never seen Shakespeare before, Mom, and Romeo and Juliet, and she died and he, you know, killed himself too. And oh my God, I love my boyfriend the same way. Like to hit young kids in musicals or in Shakespeare, I think is the most important gift to give Canada. And so in that sense, I think that it's a huge opportunity for people to come and see the world. It's like why are books important? Because it's elsewhere. It's another world. Why is it important to come and see theater? It's great to watch TV. God knows I'm a binge watcher of TV series. But what happens when an audience and a performer meet in the middle? That magic is like nothing else. So, yeah.
You mentioned Pete. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about your family. You're married to a fairly famous Canadian who we've had the honor of having on this program previously. Tell us about your husband and your son.
Peter Mansbridge is my husband, and my son is Will, named after my dad. And we're really lucky that we're a really tight unit.
And what's Will doing these days?
Will he's at U of T. He's about to finish his 4th year, and he works for a sports media company in Toronto.
Great. What's the future hold for Cynthia Dale?
I don't know. I was supposed to do a concert version of Follies this fall at Kerner Hall with some spectacular people, Eric McCormick and Shalene Kennedy and Louise Petrie and Ben Heppner and Mary Lou Follis and Sheila McCarthy and Avery Saltzman, like a whole host of incredible people, Tom Allison. It's been postponed till next year. next fall because of the way the world is and the way the world isn't. So that's that. I love to garden, thank God. I love to paint, thank God. I love to read. Yeah, that's sort of life right now. I mean, I don't think, if you'd asked me this 5 months ago, my answer would have been very different because I'm a planner. But with the way the world is right now, I can't plan anything other than dinner, really. Well. And that even then, that's hard sometimes. So that's life right now.
Cynthia, you were quoted in an article as saying something that I thought was fascinating. You said, "Buckle up your seatbelt, honey. The world is changing." To what were you referring?
I think I was referring to letting women have their rightful place at the table, and older women having their rightful place at the table.
Is that a challenge to get roles for a female actor as they age?
Maybe. I mean, there are roles out there. There are roles if you want to do it. Life shifts and changes and morphs. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think I have the same ambition that I used to have. But that's okay. Life is still pretty beautiful. And yeah, I think we all still need a seatbelt, especially with what's going on right now, for sure.
Well, we are out of time. I want to just take a moment to thank our viewers who have joined us for this special occasion.
Yes, thanks for watching, everybody.
I want to thank Rogers TV for the technical support. Thanks to Eugene and Jared at the Midland Cultural Center for their support. Thanks to our season sponsors, Kathy Bales and Michelle Deschamps of RBC Dominion Securities, and our show sponsor, HDR Graham Partners Lawyers. And a special thanks to you, Cynthia. What a delight this has been. Thank you,
Fred. Thank you so much, Fred. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you.
It's been great fun, and I wish you much success in what I know will be a continuing great career in your part.
Thank you, Fred. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, and give our regards to Peter.
Thank you, I will.
Bye for now.
Bye.